The faint smell of 6-month-old Ethan wailed from his car seat, his wedged between the couch cushions. "Here he is, Mr. Ellie to the rescue." The baby's mother glanced at her watch and groaned. She was already running 20 minutes late for her blind date, her first date in over a year. The babysitter had called just 30 minutes earlier with a stomach bug, leaving Samantha with an impossible choice: cancel the date she'd been looking forward to all week, or bring her baby along. In a moment of desperate optimism, she'd chosen the latter. "It's just coffee," she muttered to herself, grabbing her purse and diaper bag. "Worst-case scenario, he walks away as soon as he sees us. Best case, he's understanding and we reschedule." She paused to check her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she'd managed to apply a touch of makeup despite Ethan's fussiness. The dark circles under her hazel eyes were mostly concealed, and her cream-colored blouse was miraculously free of baby stains. The spring afternoon was pleasantly warm. As Samantha navigated the busy downtown streets, her mind racing with anxiety, her friend Melanie had set up this blind date, insisting that Samantha needed to get back out there after the disaster that was her relationship with Ethan's father. Brian had disappeared shortly after learning about her pregnancy, leaving behind only a brief note and a string of unpaid bills. The coffee shop, Riverside Brew, sat on the corner of Main Street overlooking the park. Through the large windows, Samantha could see it was busy but not packed. A small mercy. She'd chosen the location specifically because it... "Remember our deal," in response, one tiny hand reaching for a strand of her hair that had escaped her ponytail. Samantha spotted him immediately in a navy suit that seemed almost too formal for a coffee date. He sat at a corner table scanning his phone, an untouched cappuccino before him. Even from across the room, something about his posture screamed money and confidence. Her stomach knotted. Melanie had mentioned he was successful, but had conveniently left out just how successful. "You must be Ryan," she said, approaching the table with Ethan's car seat partially hidden behind her. The man looked up, his steel blue eyes widening slightly as they met hers. Ryan Harper stood quickly, his expression shifting from polite interest to surprise as he noticed the baby carrier. At 36, Ryan had built one of the country's most successful tech investment firms from the ground up. Forbes had recently named him among their 40 under 40 list, though he'd purposely kept a low public profile. "Samantha, yes, hello." His voice was deep and measured, but his eyes kept darting between her face and the baby. "And who's this?" She set the carrier down carefully, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "This is Ethan, my son. I'm so sorry. My babysitter cancelled at the last minute with a stomach bug, and I didn't have your number to reschedule, and I just..." She was rambling, her carefully prepared explanation dissolving into incoherence. "Sorry, I brought my baby," she finally said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I completely understand if you'd rather rain check." Ryan's expression was unreadable as he gestured for her to sit. "No, please join me. I ordered you a latte. Melanie mentioned it was your favorite." Samantha blinked in surprise, cautiously settling into the chair while positioning Ethan's carrier beside her. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." An awkward silence settled between them, punctuated by Ethan's occasional coos. Ryan cleared his throat. "How old is he?" 6 months last week," she replied, relaxing slightly. Most men she'd attempted to date since becoming a mother had made excuses and disappeared at the first mention of her son. The fact that Ryan was still sitting across from her felt like a small victory. "He has your eyes," Ryan observed, and Samantha couldn't help but smile. "Most people say that, though I think he looks more like his father." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted mentioning Brian. Ryan nodded, taking a sip of his cappuccino. "Melanie tells me you're a graphic designer." Grateful for the change of subject, Samantha launched into a description of her work for a local advertising agency and her freelance projects. Ryan listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed genuine interest. The conversation flowed more easily than she'd anticipated, and for a few minutes she almost forgot about the baby carrier beside her. Then Ethan began to fuss. "I'm so sorry," Samantha apologized, reaching for the diaper bag. "He's probably hungry. I should probably..." "Please take your time," Ryan said, his expression softening. "I'll get us refills." As Ryan headed to the counter, Samantha quickly prepared a bottle, marveling at his unexpected patience. When he returned with fresh coffee, he watched with curious interest as she fed Ethan. "You make it look easy," he commented. "Juggling everything." Samantha laughed. "Trust me, it's not. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." "I admire that," Ryan said quietly. "The resilience." There was something in his tone, a hint of sadness perhaps, that made Samantha look up sharply. Their eyes met, and for a moment she felt as though he was seeing past her exhausted single mom exterior to something deeper. The moment was broken when Ryan's phone buzzed insistently. He frowned at the screen. "I apologize, but I need to take this. It's my assistant." Samantha nodded, continuing to feed Ethan as Ryan stepped outside to take the call. Through the window, she could see his expression change from annoyance to concern. When he returned several minutes later, his demeanor had shifted entirely. "I hate to cut this short, but there's an emergency at the office I need to handle in person." He pulled a business card from his wallet and scribbled something on the back. "My personal number. I'd very much like to see you again, Samantha." The abruptness of his departure left her speechless. She glanced down at the card. Ryan Harper, CEO, Harper Innovations. Below his printed information was a hastily written note. "Dinner next Friday? I'll arrange a reliable sitter." As Ryan strode out the door, his phone already pressed to his ear, Samantha felt a conflicting mixture of hope and skepticism. Men like Ryan, wealthy, handsome, successful, didn't typically pursue single mothers with baggage and baby formula stains on their blouses. Experience had taught her to be wary. What she couldn't possibly know was that Ryan Harper was already instructing his assistant to clear his schedule for Friday evening, or that he was smiling for the first time in months. Nor could she guess the real reason behind his sudden departure, a reason that would soon collide with her own carefully constructed life, in ways neither of them could anticipate. As she gathered her things to leave, the barista approached with a paper bag. "The gentleman paid your tab and asked me to give you this," he said, handing her the package. Inside was a small stuffed giraffe with a note attached. "For Ethan. Every explorer needs a diverse animal kingdom. R." Samantha stared at the toy, tears unexpectedly pricking her eyes. It was such a small gesture, yet somehow it touched something deep within her, a place that had been closed off since Brian's betrayal. "What do you think, little man?" she whispered to her son, who had fallen asleep in his carrier. "Should we give the billionaire a chance?" The week crawled by with excruciating slowness. Samantha found herself checking her phone constantly, half expecting Ryan to cancel their dinner plans. By Thursday night, when he texted to confirm and provide details about the babysitter, a Mrs. Winters, who apparently came with impeccable references and 15 years of childcare experience, Samantha's nerves had reached a fever pitch. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she muttered to her best friend Melanie, who had arrived at her apartment Friday evening to help her get ready. "I mean, he's Ryan Harper. Do you know what comes up when you Google him?" Melanie grinned, rifling through Samantha's closet with purpose. Yeah, that's why I set you up with him." "Successful, gorgeous, and according to my husband's cousin who works for him, surprisingly decent to his employees. But why would he be interested in me? A single mom with student loan debt and a tiny apartment." Samantha bounced Ethan gently on her hip, trying to soothe his evening fussiness. "Because you're smart, talented, and completely real in a world where he's probably surrounded by fake people." Melanie emerged from the closet triumphantly holding up a forest green wrap dress. "This, with those gold earrings your mom gave you for Christmas." Samantha bit her lip. "It's just, I haven't felt this hopeful about someone since before Brian, and we both know how that turned out." Melanie's expression softened. "Sam, not every guy is going to be like Brian. You can't keep punishing yourself or Ethan by shutting everyone out." The doorbell rang promptly at 6:30. Mrs. Winters, a warm-faced woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, greeted Samantha with a professional but gentle demeanor that immediately put her at ease. She arrived with a folder containing her references, certifications in infant CPR and first aid, and a detailed questionnaire about Ethan's routines and preferences. "Mr. Harper mentioned this would be your first time leaving your son with a sitter," Mrs. Winters said, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. "I brought along my credentials to help you feel comfortable." Samantha glanced at Melanie, who raised her eyebrows as if to say, "See? Decent guy. After a thorough orientation and 3 attempts to leave, each thwarted by Samantha remembering one more thing to tell the sitter, Melanie practically pushed her friend out the door. Go, live a little. Your baby is in good hands. Ryan was waiting outside in a sleek black Audi, looking casually elegant in dark jeans and a charcoal blazer. When Samantha approached, he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and softened the sharp angles of his face. You look beautiful, he said simply, opening the passenger door for her. The restaurant was an exclusive rooftop establishment overlooking the city skyline. As they were escorted to a secluded corner table, Samantha noticed the curious glances from other diners. Clearly, Ryan Harper was recognized here. A bottle of champagne was already chilling beside their table. I hope you don't mind, Ryan said, nodding toward the champagne as they sat down. We're celebrating. Samantha raised an eyebrow. Oh? What are we celebrating? Second chances. His eyes held hers, and there was a vulnerability there that seemed at odds with his powerful persona. Throughout dinner, Samantha found herself gradually relaxing, as Ryan proved to be a thoughtful conversationalist with a surprisingly dry sense of humor. He asked questions about her design work, listened intently to her answers, and shared stories about the early days of building his company, the failures that preceded his success, the sleepless nights, the doubts. People see the Forbes articles and the corner office, he said, swirling the remaining champagne in his glass. They don't see the 3 failed startups before Harper Innovations, or the time I lived on ramen and slept on my business partner's couch for 6 months. It's hard to imagine you eating ramen, Samantha teased. Ryan laughed. I still keep a stash in my desk drawer, comfort food for late nights. As their desserts arrived, a chocolate soufflé for her, espresso for him, Ryan's expression grew more serious. Can I ask about Ethan's father? You don't have to answer if it's too personal. Samantha tensed slightly, but decided honesty was the best approach. His name is Brian. We dated for almost 2 years. When I got pregnant, he left. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. She kept her tone matter-of-fact, though the memory still stung. No child support, no contact since. Just disappeared. Ryan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, she acknowledged. Still is sometimes. But Ethan is worth every sleepless night and tight budget month. She paused, then added, What about you? Melanie mentioned you were engaged once. A shadow crossed Ryan's face. Yes, to Charlotte. It ended about 3 years ago. When he didn't elaborate, Samantha didn't press. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about his philanthropic foundation that funded educational initiatives for underprivileged youth, something she'd discovered during her late-night Google session. By the time they left the restaurant, a comfortable warmth had settled between them. In the car, Ryan hesitated before starting the engine. I have something to confess, he said, turning slightly to face her. The emergency that cut our coffee date short, it wasn't entirely business-related. Samantha felt a flicker of apprehension. Oh, my sister was in a minor car accident. She and her daughter were fine, just shaken up, but I needed to get to them quickly. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture Samantha was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. I didn't want to mention it then because it felt like oversharing for a first meeting, but I realize now it probably seemed like I was making an excuse to leave. The revelation surprised her. Your sister? You have a niece? Ryan nodded. Amelia, she's 4. And currently believes she's part mermaid. A fond smile softened his features. Grace, my sister, is a single parent too. Her husband died while she was pregnant. Something shifted in Samantha's perception of him. That's why you didn't run for the hills when I showed up with Ethan. Partly, Ryan admitted. But mostly, I was intrigued by you before you even walked in the door. Melanie speaks very highly of you, and nothing about our coffee date changed that impression. When they arrived back at her apartment, Ryan walked her to the door. Mrs. Winters reported that Ethan had been perfectly behaved and was now sleeping soundly. After settling the sitter's fee, ignoring Samantha's protests that he'd already paid enough by arranging for Mrs. Winters in the first place, Ryan lingered in the entryway. I'd like to see you again, he said, both of you. Before Samantha could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it automatically and froze. The message was from a number she hadn't seen in months, but had never been able to bring herself to delete. "Brian, need to talk. It's important. Can I come by tomorrow?" Ryan noticed her sudden tension. "Everything okay?" Samantha forced a smile, quickly tucking the phone away. "Yes, fine, just my mother checking in." The lie tasted bitter, but she couldn't bring herself to mention Brian, not now, not when the evening had been so perfect. "I'd like to see you again too," she said, pushing thoughts of Brian aside. Ryan's goodbye kiss was gentle and brief, but it left her heart racing long after he'd gone. As she checked on Ethan, sleeping peacefully in his crib, Samantha felt torn between the unexpected happiness of the evening and the dread of whatever Brian wanted. The next morning, Samantha was feeding Ethan his breakfast when the doorbell rang. Assuming it was Melanie coming to demand details about her date, she opened it without checking the peephole and found herself face to face with Brian, looking thinner and more haggard than she remembered. "Hey, Sam," he said, his familiar voice sending an unwelcome rush of complicated emotions through her. "We need to talk. It's about Ryan Harper." Samantha's hand tightened on the doorknob, her mind struggling to process Brian's words. "What did you just say?" Brian shifted uncomfortably on the landing, glancing past her into the apartment. "Can I come in? I don't want to do this in the hallway." Every instinct told her to slam the door in his face, but curiosity and a growing sense of dread made her step aside. Brian entered cautiously, his eyes immediately finding Ethan in his high chair, applesauce smeared across his chubby cheeks. "He's gotten big," Brian said softly. "That tends to happen in 6 months," Samantha replied coolly. "What do you know about Ryan Harper?" Brian sank onto the edge of her sofa, looking exhausted. His once meticulously styled hair was longer now, and a patchy beard covered his jaw. The designer clothes he'd always prioritized over paying their shared bills had been replaced by worn jeans and a faded hoodie. "I've been working for a private investigation firm," he began. "Just administrative stuff. Nothing fancy. About 3 months ago, Harper hired the company to investigate someone." Brian paused, rubbing his palms against his thighs nervously. "You." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What? That's ridiculous. We just met last week on a blind date arranged by my friend Melanie." Brian shook his head. "No, Sam, that was orchestrated. Harper's been having you investigated for months. The blind date was just his way of meeting you without raising suspicion." Samantha's mind raced back through her interactions with Ryan. The perfect timing of his call during their coffee date, the babysitter with impeccable credentials, the personal details he seemed to know without her telling him. "Why would he investigate me? I'm nobody to him." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Brian looked down at his hands. "Because of Charlotte Porter." The name registered vaguely from her conversation with Ryan, his ex-fiancée. "What about her?" "She died, Sam. 3 years ago. Car accident on Riverside Drive, a hit and run." A cold sensation spread through Samantha's chest. "I still don't understand what this has to do with me." Brian's eyes finally met hers. "The car that hit her was registered to your father." The words hung in the air like physical things. Samantha shook her head in automatic denial. "That's impossible. Dad sold his car when he moved to the retirement community in Florida 4 years ago. The insurance was still in his name." "You were driving it that night, Sam, remember? You borrowed it to move that big design project to the exhibition at the Riverside Gallery." Fragments of memory flashed through Samantha's mind. The rainstorm that night, the poor visibility, a dark shape that she'd thought was a deer darting across the road. The sickening thud she'd heard, the momentary hesitation before panic had overwhelmed her, and she'd driven away, telling herself it must have been a fallen branch or trash can. "No," she whispered, but the denial sounded hollow even to her own ears. There was no news about a hit and run. Nothing in the papers. Harper kept it quiet, used his influence to minimize media coverage while he conducted his own investigation. Brian hesitated. "Look, I shouldn't even be telling you this. I could lose my job. But when I saw your name in the file and then realized Harper was personally inserting himself into your life..." He trailed off. "I may have been a terrible boyfriend and an absent father, but I couldn't just stand by." Ethan began to fuss in his high chair, sensing the tension in the room. Samantha moved to him automatically, lifting him into her arms, his solid weight grounding her, as her world seemed to collapse around her. So what are you saying, that Ryan is, what, dating me for revenge? Brian stood, pacing the small living room. I don't know his endgame. The investigation was exhaustive. Your friends, your family, your finances, even your medical records. At first, I think he was building a case against you, but something changed in the last few months. He started asking for different kinds of information. Your favorite restaurants, the brands of baby food you buy for Ethan, details about your daily routine. Samantha felt sick. Every moment with Ryan now seemed tainted, suspicious. The connection she thought they'd shared, the vulnerability he'd shown, had it all been calculated manipulation? I need you to leave, she said suddenly, her voice steadier than she felt. I need to think. Brian looked relieved to be dismissed. At the door, he paused. Sam, be careful. Harper isn't just wealthy. He's powerful. He has connections in this city that go all the way to the top. After Brian left, Samantha placed Ethan in his playpen and sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She should call the police, but what would she say? That she might have been involved in a hit-and-run 3 years ago? That a billionaire might be dating her under false pretenses? It sounded delusional. She picked up her phone and stared at Ryan's last text, sent just hours ago. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Thinking of you both today. Anger and humiliation rose in her chest. With trembling fingers she typed, I know about Charlotte Porter. The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally a response. We need to talk. Can I come over? No, she replied. Meet me at Riverside Park, 2 p.m. by the fountain, public place. Witnesses. It seemed safer somehow. The next few hours passed in a blur. Samantha called Melanie, who arrived within 30 minutes to watch Ethan, her face tight with concern. Samantha gave her a vague explanation about needing to meet Ryan to discuss something important, ignoring her friend's curious questions. The park was busy with weekend visitors enjoying the spring weather. Samantha spotted Ryan immediately, standing by the fountain in a casual sweater and jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked different somehow, more guarded, his easy smile replaced by a grim expression that confirmed her worst fears. How long have you known? He asked without preamble when she approached. About Charlotte since this morning. Samantha hugged her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. Did you plan this from the beginning? Getting close to me, making me trust you, making me... She stopped herself before admitting she'd started to fall for him. Ryan's expression was unreadable. Yes, initially. The simple admission hit her like a physical blow. Why the elaborate setup? Why not just confront me? Or have me arrested if you think I killed her? Because I needed to be sure. Ryan glanced around, then gestured to a more secluded bench nearby. After a moment's hesitation, Samantha followed him. The police investigation was inconclusive, he continued once they were seated, a careful distance between them. The only witness saw a red sedan, but couldn't identify the driver. It took my private investigators nearly a year to trace it to your father's insurance. So you decided to what? Seduce a confession out of me? Samantha's voice rose, drawing glances from passing joggers. Ryan's jaw tightened. I needed to look you in the eye, to understand what kind of person could hit someone and drive away, leaving them to die alone in the rain. I didn't know. The words burst from her before she could stop them. I thought it was an animal or something in the road. It was pouring that night. Visibility was terrible. I never saw a person. For a long moment, Ryan simply stared at her, searching her face as if trying to detect a lie. I believed you were a monster, he said finally, his voice lower. I spent 3 years imagining the cold-hearted person who could do such a thing, building you into this villain in my mind. Then I met you and Ethan at that coffee shop, and nothing made sense anymore. Samantha felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. So coffee was what? A test and dinner? Was Mrs. Winters recording our conversations, searching my apartment while we were out? Ryan flinched. No, nothing like that. He hesitated. By the time we had coffee, I had already begun to doubt my theory. Your background, your character references, nothing aligned with the profile of someone who would commit a hit and run. But you still didn't tell me the truth. Samantha stood abruptly. You let me believe there was something real between us, when the whole time you were investigating me for killing your fiancé. As she turned to leave, Ryan caught her wrist gently. "Samantha, wait. There's something else you need to know about that night. Something that changes everything." Samantha hesitated, torn between walking away and hearing whatever revelation Ryan claimed to have. His expression was earnest, almost pleading, a stark contrast to the controlled businessman she'd come to know. "5 minutes," she conceded, sinking back onto the bench. "Then I'm leaving." Ryan nodded, visibly collecting his thoughts. "Charlotte and I were arguing that night," he began, his voice tight with painful memory. "She'd discovered I'd been meeting secretly with her father's business rival about a potential merger. She saw it as betrayal, both personal and professional." He stared across the park, his eyes focused on something Samantha couldn't see. "She stormed out of my apartment in the rain. I should have gone after her immediately, but I was angry too. By the time I did, it was too late. She was already—" He swallowed hard. "When the police couldn't identify the driver, I became obsessed with finding whoever was responsible." "So you could what? Make them pay?" Samantha asked quietly. "At first, yes," Ryan admitted. "Revenge was all that kept me functioning some days, but something happened during the investigation." He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. "2 months ago, my team discovered security camera footage from a convenience store near the accident site. The timestamp places it just 3 minutes before Charlotte was hit." Samantha frowned, not understanding the significance. "The footage shows Charlotte arguing with someone in a black SUV, not your red sedan. The vehicle belonged to James Whitman, her father's head of security. When confronted with this evidence, Whitman confessed that Charlotte had called him for a ride after our fight. They argued about her relationship with me. She got out of his car in anger, stepping directly into the path of oncoming traffic, into the path of your car, without looking." The revelation hit Samantha like a physical blow. "Are you saying the accident wasn't entirely your fault?" Ryan finished quietly. "Charlotte was distraught, not paying attention. Whitman saw everything but fled the scene because he'd been drinking. Between the rainstorm, the dark clothing Charlotte was wearing, and her sudden movement into the street, you never stood a chance of avoiding her." Samantha pressed her hands to her mouth, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. For 3 years, she'd buried the memory of that night, convincing herself she'd imagined the impact. The guilt she'd carried, unacknowledged but ever present, suddenly had a name, a face, a story. "Why didn't you tell me this when you first found out?" she asked, her voice breaking. Ryan's expression was pained. "Because by then, I'd already met you, already started to care about you, and I couldn't bear to see your face when you realized the truth." He ran a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture of discomfort. "I kept telling myself I needed more evidence before bringing it up, but the truth is I was afraid of losing the connection we were building, afraid of hurting you, afraid of what it meant for my own grief if Charlotte's death was partly her own doing." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by distant laughter from children playing and the splash of the fountain. "I need to know something," Samantha finally said. "That night at dinner when you asked about Brian, when you shared about your sister, was any of that real?" "All of it," Ryan answered without hesitation. "Everything I've told you about myself was true. It's the reasons for us meeting that I concealed." Samantha stood, needing space to process everything. "I can't do this right now. I need time to think, to sort through what this all means." Ryan nodded, not attempting to stop her this time. "I understand. For what it's worth, what started as something calculated became something genuine, more genuine than anything I've felt since before Charlotte died." As Samantha walked away, emotions warred within her: anger at his deception, sympathy for his loss, relief at finally understanding what had happened that rainy night, and confusion about her own feelings for a man who had entered her life under false pretenses. Melanie was full of questions when Samantha returned home, but one look at her friend's tear-streaked face was enough to hold them back. Instead, she simply hugged Samantha and promised to call the next day, leaving her alone with Ethan and her turbulent thoughts. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Samantha finally allowed herself to fully remember the events of 3 years ago. The exhibition at the gallery that had kept her working late, the borrowed car because hers was in the shop, the terrible storm that had reduced visibility to almost nothing, the shape that had suddenly appeared in her headlights, giving her no time to react, the sickening thud, The moment of panic when she'd convinced herself it couldn't have been a person, because people didn't just appear in the middle of the road during a storm. The guilt she'd suppressed all this time washed over her in waves, leaving her curled on her bedroom floor, silent sobs shaking her body. A woman had died. Ryan's fiancée had died, and she had been involved. Not solely responsible, perhaps, but involved nonetheless. And she had driven away. Morning found her exhausted but calmer, a strange sense of clarity emerging from the emotional storm. As she fed Ethan his breakfast, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. No pressure. Just wanted to check if you're okay. Samantha stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Before she could decide, another text arrived. I've spoken with my lawyer this morning. I've submitted a formal statement to the police clarifying the circumstances of Charlotte's accident, including Whitman's confession and the new evidence. Your name is not mentioned. This chapter is closed, Samantha, whatever you decide about us. The gesture, clearing her of legal jeopardy without her even asking, touched something deep within her. It spoke of a decency that went beyond romantic interest or guilt. 3 days passed with no communication between them. Samantha threw herself into work and caring for Ethan, trying to make sense of her conflicted feelings. On the 4th day, a package arrived at her door, a small, elegantly wrapped box with no note. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 2 charms, a tiny elephant like Ethan's favorite toy, and a small umbrella. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Acknowledgement of both the beginning of their connection and the tragedy that had unknowingly linked them years before. That evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Samantha made a decision. She dialed Ryan's number, half expecting him not to answer. He picked up on the 2nd ring. Samantha. Can you come over? She asked simply. After Ethan's asleep, around 8, there was a brief pause. I'll be there. Ryan arrived precisely at 8, looking both hopeful and apprehensive. Samantha led him to her small living room, where she'd prepared 2 cups of tea, a far cry from the fine champagne of their dinner date, but somehow more fitting for the conversation they needed to have. I've been thinking about forgiveness, she began, sitting across from him. About how sometimes the person we most need to forgive is ourselves. Ryan watched her intently, letting her speak without interruption. What you did, investigating me, orchestrating our meeting, it was wrong, she continued, but I understand why you did it. Grief can make us desperate for answers, for someone to blame. She took a deep breath. And what I did that night, driving away, convincing myself nothing had happened, that was wrong too. We both made mistakes, Ryan said quietly. Terrible ones. Samantha nodded. The question is whether we can move forward from here. Start again, but honestly this time. She met his gaze directly. No more secrets. Ryan set his untouched tea aside and leaned forward. I want that more than anything. These past months of investigation, the anger that's driven me for years, none of it brought Charlotte back. But meeting you and Ethan, he hesitated. It made me feel alive again, like maybe there's still room in life for joy and connection. I'm not ready to jump back in where we left off, Samantha cautioned. We need to rebuild, slowly, honestly. I'll take whatever you're willing to give, Ryan said, even if it's just friendship for now. A small smile touched Samantha's lips. Maybe we could start with another coffee date, a real one this time, and maybe, after enough coffee dates, dinner again. With Ethan? Ryan asked, a hopeful note in his voice that surprised her. With Ethan, she confirmed. He's part of the package deal. Ryan reached across the space between them, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Samantha placed her own in it. 6 months later, as autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson, Ryan knelt in the same park where they'd confronted the truth, Ethan balanced on his knee and giggling as he helped open a small velvet box. Inside gleamed a simple but elegant diamond ring. We started with secrets and pain, Ryan said, looking up at a tearful Samantha, but we found our way to truth and healing. I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you both. Will you marry me? As Samantha nodded through her tears, Ethan clapped his hands in delight, unaware that his presence at that first coffee date had been the catalyst for a journey that had brought healing to 2 broken hearts, and created a family where once there had been only loss and solitary struggle.